Hey, and welcome back. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Preston. I'm a professional recruiter in the technology industry. Let's talk a little bit more about the recruiting process, shall we? Every recruiter's process is a little bit different depending on their niche and personal preferences. I find, however, that the most consistently successful recruiters rely on a client intake call with new clients to establish credibility and gather information about the role before beginning to source and target any candidates. So in this video, we're going to review what exactly client intake call is and the best practices for conducting the perfect client intake call. By the end of the video, I hope that you'll see the importance of a preliminary research and using the client's intake call to really inform your hiring decisions and recruiting strategy. But before we get started, as always, please consider like, subscribe, click that bell. It really means a lot. A client intake call is one of the most important initial phases of the overall recruiting process. It involves meeting with the hiring managers and other members of your client's team in order to set goals and expectations and gather information about the roles that needs to be filled. In all but the rarest of cases, it's unwise to skip a client intake call and jump right into the candidate sourcing process because you'll honestly be missing out on critical and valuable information that will help you find, locate strong and qualified people to fill the open role. Without a client intake call, your client will likely feel left in the dark on your process, and the chances of earning their trust and developing rapport from the start are slim to none. That being said though, client intake calls are typically performed by retained or exclusive recruiters, as they will have the knowledge and expertise, and most importantly the time to sit down with managers, founders, and really work out the details together. On the other hand, generally speaking, contingency recruiters are less likely to perform client intake calls due to the nature of their job. The results are typically focused on quantity over quality for less specialized roles and will need to start the search right away in order to really remain effective. In many cases though, these roles are so general that they won't require a huge amount of research into them. While a majority of my engagements with clients are contingency based and technical based, I always kick off any engagement with any intake call and refuse to start without doing so. If you have no idea what I'm talking about and want to learn more about the differences between retained, exclusive, and contingency recruiters, make sure to check out my previous videos. Why perform a client intake call? Obviously, it's impossible to find qualified candidates for a position you know nothing about. One of the main goals of a client intake call is to define the job titles and responsibilities of the role you'll be recruiting for to develop qualification criteria and a detailed roadmap of the recruiting process. The client intake call also helps keep the hiring managers involved and engaged, which really helps maintain healthy working relationships and reduces miscommunication. Client intake calls are especially important for roles that are new either to you, the recruiter, or within the company itself. If you are familiar with the role, and especially if you have experience hiring for other roles within the organization, a shortened client intake call may be appropriate. And if you are a long-term retained or exclusive recruiter, you may choose to skip a client intake call altogether, but that is totally up to you. A client intake call helps set realistic expectations and goals for the overall process and helps recruiters and managers come to a general agreement on the ideal candidate's profile. The intake process will vary depending on the size and need of your client company, but these are some general guidelines to follow that will help you plan and execute effective client intake calls. Preparing for a client intake call. So you want to go into a client intake call prepared with the right materials and questions so you can really dig down and get into the nitty-gritty details of the role you're recruiting for. While the goal of a client intake call is certainly to gather information about the role, it's honestly necessary to also do preliminary research even before the client intake call actually happens so you can really save time and establish credibility with your clients from the bat. Preliminary research. You'll want to conduct some preliminary research about the role from both inside the company and outside, within other companies. What is the average salary for the role? How does it compare to the organization's competitors? Can you offer higher salary or competitive benefits to stand out to active job seekers? What are the skills and qualifications that are typically required for the role? Are there any that are unique to the company? What knowledge might be beneficial but not necessary? Next, you want to think about a potential roadmap or time frame. Roughly how long or how many candidates do you think it will take you to complete the hiring process? Obviously, this will vary, sometimes pretty significantly, but it's helpful to come prepared with a rough timeline so your client has an idea of how long the process will actually take. Here are 3 metrics you can use to help estimate the total length of time of the hiring process. Yield ratios. This metric is the percentage of candidates that pass from one stage of the hiring process to another. Use this to determine the efficiency of the hiring process. If you're losing too many candidates before they make it to the final stages, you may consider amending your methods. A couple reasons why this could happen come to mind are such that maybe the interview stages could be too long, or maybe you're demanding the candidates to do too much work during the interview process, like in a case study or a job assignment. Or maybe the team takes too long to get back to candidates after each stage, and then they just lose competitiveness from other companies that are also interviewing the same candidate. Time to hire. This metric measures the average time between a candidate and their acceptance of an offer. It gives you an idea of how quickly you're able to locate the most qualified candidate and move them through the onboarding process. The better you do on an intake call and the clearer you understand the perfect profile, the better you're targeting and faster you can reach out to the right person. Time to fill. This metric tracks the average number of days between a job being posted and when a candidate accepts an offer. It is typically used to see how effective your advertising efforts are. At this point, you also want to think about any previous hires you've made that may be appropriate for the role. Where did you find them? You may want to check those sources again. If you haven't recruited for a similar position before, you want to take some time to think about some potential candidate sources beyond your typical tools such as LinkedIn, Indeed, Dice, or ZipRecruiter, although these are excellent tools in certain situations. Finally, do some initial research to find basic information about the specific role you're hiring for. Why is the position open? Is it a new position, or are you replacing a previous employee in a backfill? Is this a long-term or a permanent position, or something shorter, temporary, maybe contract? These are all things that you can learn during the meeting itself, but it's best to go in as prepared as possible. During the client intake call. The client intake call itself is when it's time to demonstrate the knowledge and expertise you have by presenting your research to the hiring managers. After your introductions, review the job title and the role's requirements, being sure that you and the client are on the same page. Also, discuss the salary range and the benefits package. Finally, make sure you and the client are clear on the overall stages of the hiring process and see if they need assistance with things like reviewing resumes, interviewing, feedback, references, or even extending the offer. Next, you want to ask questions. In the past, I've talked a lot about the importance of specific pointed questions that dig deep into the details of the position. The client intake call is the time to ask these questions. When you come prepared with as much basic information as you can gather, you'll be able to really form more specific questions targeted to find information that would otherwise be harder or impossible to find, and thus be able to understand the ideal profile clearly. Here are some examples of questions you may want to go in when asking during client intake call. Keep in mind that these are only general examples, and you'll want to be as specific as possible for the organization and the role and industry you're recruiting for. Why does this role need to be filled? What is the department's role in the organization? What is the role's function within the department? What is the structure of the department? Who will the employee report to directly? What are the main responsibilities of the role? What contributions will the new employees make within their first 90 days at the company? What qualifications are must-haves and what skills are prepared but not necessary? What opportunities for training and upskilling are there in the role? How much industry experience should the candidates have, if any? Are there any tools or software applications the candidates should be proficient in? What kind of assessments are necessary for this role? What kind of upward career opportunities does this role have? It's important to really emphasize to your client to really drill down on the specific qualifications that are absolutely necessary and separate them from things that would be nice to have. A long list of requirements is ineffective for a number of reasons. Not only does it intimidate and turn away potential candidates, but it also places an impossible burden on both you and the client, because the chances of finding someone that meets so many qualifications, the unicorn, are really slim to none or extremely difficult. As you conclude the client intake call, be sure to iterate and reinforce what was agreed upon in order to avoid any miscommunications. Additionally, ensure the client that you'll be in touch with questions, concerns, or updates should they arise. Follow through on this promise by staying in constant contact and keeping them informed. It will honestly go a long way in building trust and genuine relationships. So this just about wraps up this video on client intake calls. Do you have any additional thoughts? Love to hear from them down below. If you like this video, just want to see more like it, please consider like, subscribe, click that bell. It really means a lot. Feel free to also follow me at Preston_Park, as I try my best to also post daily. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one.